Hello. We're going to continue our discussion of therapy, which we will do for the rest of the semester. We're going to begin with my suggestion, and I'm sure this is not original. I'm sure I've taken it from a number of different sources. Just a general format and structure of a session. I'm not sure that this is specific to aphasia, although it certainly does work for aphasia. It could very well be that this is a well-recommended structure for any kind of a therapy session. So let's go through this. We're going to talk about 5 different segments. We're going to call the first one the hello segment. Hello might literally be hello. It sounds a little bit silly, but we often forget to say that. We often forget. We come into therapy and we just say, hey, let's get started, or something like that. Hello means literally hello, and hello means a little bit more than that. Hello means what would you normally say if you encountered another adult whom you have not seen now for a while, at least a day or 2 or 3 or a week perhaps. How are you? What's new? How is your fill in the blank? Is it your wife, your child? How was your trip? Something like that. We're not belaboring this. We're not going to spend more than a minute or 2 on a hello segment, but we have to set a normal communication mode. It's an important issue. We're modeling normal communication. We're trying to elicit normal communication. There are times that the hello segment will change the rest of the session. You think that you know what you're going to be doing, but you do the hello segment and you say, hi, how are you? Anything new? And you find out something is new. You find out that the patient has had an illness and they're going to be admitted to the hospital. You find out that a family member is not well or is going away, or the train broke down, or that the helper is no longer going to be working for them after today. I can't begin to anticipate all the different things that you might hear, but it requires that you then respond the way you should be responding. If you say, hello, how are you? Anything new? And he says, yeah, well, my wife had a heart attack. And you say, okay, cool. Well, let's go on and do our session. Clearly not. Clearly we don't do that. And so we need to always be flexible, but that hello segment is an important issue. If you don't ask that question, if you don't say what's new, what's going on in your life, basically, you won't know, and you really won't know what's going on in that patient and his motivation and his attention today. And you say, wow, he's really not doing well. Well, of course he's not doing well, because X, Y, and Z is happening in his life. And so we need to ask those questions. We don't probe, we don't push. We just ask a general kind of a question. Hello, how are you? How was your trip? Did you find a parking space? Something general. The next segment is something that we can call an accommodation segment. An accommodation segment is basically a brief review of where you were the last time you saw that patient. So if the last time you saw that patient, you were doing a pointing task and he was pointing to 2 items out of a matrix of 10 and he was getting them reasonably well, he was, let's say, 70% level of getting them correct in the correct sequence. Well, let's go back to that. Your goal today is to go beyond there, but let's make sure that he is where you left him. The odds are he may not be. He may need a warm-up. The accommodation is really basically a warm-up. It's a review. He may need that warm-up. You think that he's been doing homework. You think that he's doing practice. You probably know better. And so you need that warm-up. You need that accommodation segment. Let's get back to where we are, and let's make sure that the level that had been attained before is still there, that there hasn't been a slip or a slide or some kind of a regression. It could happen, but we need to know. So far, we haven't taken up more than 5 minutes of a session between the hello and the accommodation. If there are no surprises, we probably haven't taken up much more than 5 minutes. We now go to what is the crux of a therapy session, And in fact, if we skip the hello and accommodation, which many people do, unfortunately, where they begin therapy is the work segment. The work segment is basically, that's my goal for today. This is what I want to accomplish. This is where I want my patient to be today. And so whether that's pointing to 3 items out of 10, whether that's filling in blanks on a sentence, whether that's writing, whether that's pointing, whatever that task is, this is my introduction of either a new therapy style, a new therapy level. This is what's new for today. This is what do I want to accomplish. If you had to boil down and say, if you write a lesson plan and you can only limit it to 1 sentence, what you're going to write is that work segment. Okay? Hopefully you'll write more. But the work segment is really the new thing. It's what today is all about. Okay? That work segment, again, let's assume that we're talking about a 30-minute session. Nothing magic about that. We will talk a little bit later about how long a session perhaps should be. But let's assume that this is a 30-minute session. So the hello and accommodation took up about 5 minutes. That work segment should take up about 20. Somewhere between 15 and 20, probably around 20. Okay, it's the bulk of what we're doing today. When we finish that, we move to the cool down segment. The cool down segment is basically a review of the work segment. So what did we do? Where did we get to? What was our highest level of attainment? And now we're going to just review that. We're going to do it a couple of more times. We're not going to push for a further goal. We're not going to try to make the patient do it even more than he was able to accomplish. But whatever level he reached before in that work segment, his highest level, we're now going to review that. We're going to do it a couple more times. Maybe we'll do it in a slightly different way, but it's not going to be harder and it's not going to be more difficult. We're really not pushing the patient at this point. It's really a cool down. If you think about this whole thing as some kind of a run, and you begin with a warm-up, and then you actually do your run, and then what do you do afterwards? You do your cool down. Trust me, it's not something I do. It's something I see other people do. So you're going to do your cool down. And you're going to end by actually saying goodbye. But goodbye is more than just the social aspect of goodbye, although it is the social aspect of saying goodbye. It's also assignment of homework. It's assignment of when are we going to meet again? What is the patient going to be doing for the next time? Are there any changes for next time? Are there forms to be filled out? It's a wrap-up, but it's not therapy in any way, really. What it is the trappings around therapy. It's the opposite of the hello segment, which also was not therapeutic, at least in its structure. And the goodbye is also not. You assume this patient comes in every week, and so in your mind, okay, so I'll see you next week. And in his mind, I say, oh, actually, no, not next week because whatever, fill in the blank. I have a doctor's appointment. I'm going on vacation. My wife is away. My worker who attends with me is not going to be available. Whatever the issue is. So the goodbye is an important part of therapy as well. It wraps things up, and now we're ready. So again, I'm suggesting this as a format and a structure of a session. I'm not suggesting at this point at all what the content is. This is purely a structure. Okay. We're going to begin a discussion and end it today, but not on this segment because this is going to take some time. Again, clearly on therapy, but now we're talking about actual therapy, not structure. This is something that we have to think about really strong and hard. I would like to think this is not new, but unfortunately, I think perhaps for some of you at least, it may be a new way of thinking about therapy. We're going to begin with the concept of a task analysis. A task analysis. We can take any kind of a task and break it down into many, many, many component parts. I may say to a person, tell me the name of this. And he says the name of it. Cool. At a macro level, there were only two things that occurred there. I gave an instruction, the patient gave a response. And if that's where we leave it, then we're going to do bad therapy. What we have to do is we have to conceptualize what actually occurred between my saying, tell me the name of this, and that patient giving you the name of that. And the fact is, we can break it down into many, many, many parts. Why is this important? Because if we leave it at that macro level, and I say to the patient, tell me the name of this, and he's wrong, at the macro level, all we know is, well, he didn't name it correctly. So what might we do? Well, we might do something really not helpful and just say, oh, it's a such and such. Why don't you just repeat that? That indicates two things. If one did that, and unfortunately many therapists do something like that, what that would indicate is that one is you perceive nothing occurring between the command and the response. Two is that you could actually teach the person, and that what you have to do is teach the person the name of that item. And that's also an unfortunate conclusion to come to. So we're going to introduce now this concept of a task analysis. And we're going to see how that plays into therapy and how we actually use that. Okay? It actually comes back, we kind of indicated this one quite a number of weeks ago. We mentioned the Wepman model, and we talked about all the steps that are involved. Shul taught us that, and she used the Wepman model to show that for a person to actually hear and to understand a word, many things have to occur. And here I'm just putting it into some kind of a graph form. And so the first thing that has to happen is the person has to detect sound. In this case, the sound is a word. It's a lexical item. If, in fact, the task is something like, he has to understand the word and point to. So I'm saying point to the cup, right? He has to hear the word cup. Okay, just an acoustic basis. He then has to do an auditory phonological analysis. He has to kind of separate that. It's not just sound, but there are actually phonemes in that word, cup. And he's got to do an analysis of the at a phonological level. He has to then somehow put those phonemes together and challenge and search his semantic system to see if there isn't such a word in his system, in his semantic system, in his lexicon. He gets to the semantic network now. Okay. And now he has to access his own personal dictionary. And if in fact we're asking, if in fact we're asking for some kind of a spoken response, then we have to have an output. I'm sorry, this is very sensitive. An output of the phonological network or an input of phonological network, okay, depending whether or not we're getting an auditory input, a verbal output. But there are many, many steps involved, okay? This was not simply a matter of hearing the word cup and pointing to cup. Okay? There is room for error at many, many different levels. Okay, we're going to stop. We're going to pick up a new type.